Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back your conference MC, Greg Schwem.
Do you believe it is almost over? That's sad, isn't it? I think it's sad. I've had so much fun. I hope you've had as much fun as I have. This is my first time joining you, and I've had such a great time just meeting all of you. You know, like Monday night, I met so many of you walking around the streets of Chicago. And by the way, here's a tip, you guys. When you are walking around the streets of Chicago, it is not necessary to wear your CACS badges, okay? I have lived here just about all my life. I've never met anybody on Rush Street who said, boy, oh boy, where is a cybersecurity expert? When you, hey, come on in. I have so many questions about bots. So I hope you've had a great time here. The weather's been great. I hope it's been a safe time for you. You know, that's the thing about Chicago. Chicago gets kind of a bad rap sometimes because people say, oh, it's not a very safe city. But I want to set your mind at ease. Chicago's a very safe city, and I know this for a fact because I did a show not long ago for the mayor's office, and they sent me a bunch of facts about the city. And here's something you probably don't know. Chicago has 5 mounted police officers and 9 police horses. So do the math, people. Right now there are 4 horses running around Chicago arresting people all by themselves. Yeah, so put that out of your mind. Chicago's a safe city. Here's something else, just a little observation. Maybe you can think about this for next year, is that maybe we cool it with the acronyms, okay? Because I've spent like 3 days trying to figure out what the heck you people are talking about. I mean, it's easy for you, but it's hard for me. And the problem with abbreviating, let's talk about CACS, okay? So CACS stands for Computer Auditing Control Security, right? Yeah, well, that's what you think it stands for. Yeah, when I got this job, my manager calls me and he says, hey, how'd you like to do a show for an organization called CACS? And I like to find out as much information as I can about the group I'm working for, so I Googled CACS and I called him back and I said, by all means, I would love to do a show for the Chinese American Chemical Society. So that's why we don't want to abbreviate anymore, because we're doubling up on the acronyms. We're running out of letter combinations. I have a daughter who's a junior at the University of Iowa, just finishing her junior year. And oh yeah, oh you're applauding University of Iowa or college-age girls? Which one, sir? Is little little of both? Yeah, me too. Okay, so you're a Hawkeye? Are you a Hawkeye? Yeah. Okay, very good. Yeah, great school. Yeah. So here's the thing. So you probably know this. So when my daughter accepted their offer, from that moment on, all of the correspondence between the university and us came from the Iowa Student Information System. Now, do you know what it's like as a parent to walk out to your mailbox and see a big puffy letter addressed to your daughter from ISIS, ladies and gentlemen, that says, welcome aboard? Well, as I said, we are just about to call North America CACS a wrap, but not quite. Because first, we have more experts to feature, we have more information and more insights to share. And we do sincerely hope that all of the sessions, the networking, and the fun that you've had over the last few days have recharged you and inspired you to return to your organizations with new ideas and innovative solutions.
Thank you for joining us for the North American CACS. And as a reminder, next year will be our 50th anniversary. It'll be a major CACS. We'd love to see you back in Anaheim. We hope you've had a memorable and enjoyable conference. As we think about how we are driving change and evolving to meet challenges and opportunities, I'd like to introduce our closing keynote speaker. One of the world's leading futurists, she uses her engineering background with an intuitive understanding of how society is likely to respond to new technologies. She discusses not only the security implications of emerging technologies, but also its implications on users, the privacy, and yes, ethical issues. If you've tuned into the news any time in the past few years, print, digital, or broadcasts, chances are you've seen her commenting on technology issues, and she provides strategic insight into the latest technology innovation and cutting-edge research. She is the founder and CEO of Market Clarity, an award-winning technology analyst firm that provides insight, intelligence, and advice on all aspects of the telecom and emerging technology markets. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Shara Evans.
Good morning, everybody. I am just so thrilled to be part of ISACA's North America CACS conference. I had a blast yesterday meeting people in various panels and in a VIP lunch, and I hope to get to meet a lot more of you today after my session. We are living in such an exciting time when it comes to technology. There are some amazing things on the horizon that are going to really change what it means to be human and change our entire society. But while there are so many benefits, there are also incredible risks, and we're at a pivot point right now. Cybersecurity is going to be one of the most important occupations in the years to come. So all of you are absolutely in the right place and in the right career. Do you know, every day I read about another hack, and I'm sure that you do too. But it's not just hacking. It's also these massive privacy violations and data breaches that really have me worried. And one of the things that has been in the news has been the Facebook scandal. I actually put this word cloud together back in 2016, and I used what Facebook published as the information that they collect about us. There were 96 different things that Facebook publicly admitted to collecting. And the bigger the word, the more information they amass about that particular aspect of your life. A lot of it has to do with your personal life, your family life, your credit history, whether you own a house or a car, your financial position, what sort of things you look at on the internet and like and dislike. We are, by giving this information out freely, sleepwalking into losing our privacy, perhaps forever. But it goes beyond the information that we just share and put online. There are techniques that are being developed, and in particular one at Cambridge University in the psychology research department that is using a new technique called psychometrics to look at your activity on social media networks, the things that you like, to figure out a very detailed personal profile of you as an individual over and above the things that you might overtly share. All the way back in 2012, researchers determined that with 68 likes, just liking 68 things, they could determine your race, your political views, your ethnicity, and a whole range of personal information without even seeing your profile picture. With 150 likes, they might know you better than your parents do. With 300 likes, they figure they know you better than your partner knows you. And more than that, they might know you better than you even know yourself. These techniques are being used by a wide range of companies. And last year, it was actually in 2016, we saw that in the Trump campaign, they started to use very heavily Facebook advertising and put together a database that they called Project Alamo. And according to news reports, this database, which contained information from Facebook, but as well as from data aggregators and Cambridge Analytica and a number of other sources, had about 4,000 to 5,000 points of information on up to 220 million Americans. And they were using Facebook advertising to be able to target voters. And that's fair enough. You know, it's no different than any other kind of advertising. But then they did a couple of other things which many people were not aware of. And that was using what they called Facebook dark ads to not just target their supporters, but to actually target the people who supported their opponents, and get them to not vote. In other words, dissuade people who might vote for Hillary Clinton to not get out and vote at all. And the thing with dark ads is that those advertisements on Facebook were only available to the people that they were targeted at. So you don't really know what they contained and what they didn't. And one of the things that Facebook had was an ability to be able to upload your list of subscribers, like your mailing list, and then match those names with the Facebook profile, and again, use that in targeting. And then another feature was finding lookalike subscribers. In other words, people who weren't on your mailing list but had many of those same attributes, and then you can target ads to them. All the way back right after the election, Cambridge Analytica's CEO was making claims about how they helped Donald Trump win the election. So fast forward to less than 2 months ago, and suddenly we have this whole Cambridge Analytica scandal. And in this scandal, it turned out that one of the researchers who came out of Cambridge but formed a separate company had designed an application that was a personality quiz. And 270,000 people downloaded this personality quiz. But because of loosey-goosey permissions in the Facebook platform, it allowed the people to not only have their information sucked up, aside from what they answered in the quiz, but also allowed the profile data from their friends to be sucked up as well. So instead of building a database of 270,000 people's profiles who had consented to using an app, we ended up with profiling of 87 million people, which is a huge difference. It's because of the friend networks. And then it gets worse than that. A little while ago, less than a month, people started to look at what kind of data Facebook was holding on them and downloading it in zip files. And to the surprise of many people, they found that Facebook was also tracking the metadata from their telephone conversations on their phones and from their SMS text. And they had no idea that this was happening. It got narrowed down, and researchers found that it was tied to the Android operating system, and in particular some of the older versions of Android that gave very wide default permissions to be able to record a whole lot of data. So anybody who might have been using a Facebook app on an Android phone might have also found that their telephone conversations and SMS conversations were also being surveilled. And with metadata, you can actually figure out a lot of things about a person's activity, including their location and who their patterns of calling are, time of day, all sorts of stuff. And it gets even worse still, because just a few weeks ago, Facebook disclosed that about 2 billion users were the target of bad actors who were using Facebook's capabilities of entering in a phone number or an email address to find out the profile, and that this data of 2 billion people was being scraped and used by bad actors across the world. It's not just Facebook that is doing this. I've picked on Facebook for a few minutes because it's very newsworthy and very topical, and it hits so many people. But there are lots of companies that are starting to do things that I think really overstep the bounds of privacy. About a year ago, Uber changed its application on your smartphones so that it tracks you automatically for 5 minutes after you get out of the Uber car. And if you happen to have been using an iOS application that had your ride sharing integrated in with Apple's Maps application, the tracking just kept going and going. So not only for 5 minutes after you've left the vehicle, they were tracking your whereabouts forever until you decided to turn it off or were aware of it. So many people say to me that young people don't care about privacy. Well, let me say, the person who brought this to my attention when the app first changed was a 20-year-old young man, and he cared enough to have deleted the Uber app from his phone as soon as he found out that it was tracking him after he was out of the car. His comment to me was, "They don't need to know what I do once I leave the car. There's absolutely no good reason for them to have it." We're seeing this sort of privacy violation across lots of applications. On the left, I took a screenshot from an upgrade that I did to my Skype app on my phone about a year ago. And Skype used to work by using the contacts on my address book, but still just keeping things in my address book. Now, if I want to be able to access my contacts from within my Skype app, I have to agree to let Microsoft upload my entire contact book of thousands of people to them on a periodic basis. Guess what? I declined that offer. I don't want Microsoft to know my many thousands of contacts. They don't need it. You don't need it for the app to work. So I copy and paste phone numbers when I want to use a Skype call. Amazon has come out with a new device called Amazon Echo Show, which is a video device. And it's a pretty cool thing, but it has some interesting capabilities that also make me wonder about privacy. One of them is that if you have your contact books, once again, it gets uploaded, and then it looks for whoever else might have one of these devices, and it will automatically show you a green light for every contact that you have, no matter how infrequently you talk to them, as to whether they have an Amazon Echo Show and are currently online. They've also got a feature called Drop-In, where you can give someone permission to literally turn on the camera on your phone, on your device, and watch what you're doing without your explicit accepting of a call. And there might be reasons that you do this maybe with your parents, or you want to be able to look at your kids. But again, you start getting into this bit of what's interesting and what's safe and what gets creepy. One of the questions that I've been asking myself for a while now is, are these privacy violations crimes against humanity? Are we actually moving into a state where we are losing our privacy and it is fundamentally impacting what it means to live a full life? I recently was looking through some of the UN resolutions, and in 1948, the UN's resolution on human rights said that privacy is a fundamental human right. They've gone on to do a number of declarations of privacy in the digital age, and one of the things that is very clear from the UN declarations and resolutions is that privacy is fundamental to the expression of freedom and to be able to participate politically, socially, culturally in a democratic society. And that the arbitrary surveillance and collection of data, whether it be on communications or personal information, may very well contravene the tenets of a democratic society. And in particular, they noted that metadata, especially when aggregated, can be used to reveal very, very personal activities of people. And they expressed a great deal of concern. So what can we do about this privacy violation? I think that Europe's steps in the GDPR are heading in the right direction. I think we need to move globally into an opt-in environment where the default is that we do not give consent. We actually have to expressly say, yes, I'm happy for you to use that information in a particular way for a particular point in time, and I can take that data back. What else might we do? Well, I think it might be worth looking from both a UN inquiry and perhaps additional congressional inquiries or parliamentary inquiries around the world as to whether crimes have actually been committed according to the law of the land. Another remedy that we might look at is whether some of these huge tech giants ought to be broken up in a similar way to the AT&T monopoly that was broken up a number of years back, decades now, here in America. And lastly, when it comes to data ownership, right now the rule seems to be that whoever collects the data is deemed to be the owner of the data. But in my view, I think that we, the people who the data is about, should be the owner of the data. You know, let's put it right back to the people. So one of the questions is, will it be necessary to go into outer space to actually retain our privacy? There's actually a new nation being formed called Asgardia, and it's named after the Norse mythological city of Asgard, which you probably know from some of the Marvel Comics, Avengers movies. And they have actually just launched their first nano satellite in November of 2017, and they're starting to store some personal data that's sort of beyond the reach of the law and beyond the reach of other people. We're actually entering a really interesting time with space exploration because of the development of reusable rockets. In the next 10 years, it may be very, very feasible to have a space-based nation based on a space station. Gosh, it sounds like science fiction, doesn't it? But it's happening now. Artificial intelligence is another one of these technologies that is just going to be pervasive through almost everything that we do in our lives. I'd like to just spend a moment demystifying AI. So when I talk about AI, I'm really talking about an umbrella term that encompasses machine learning, deep learning, image recognition, facial detection, biometrics, smart robots, natural language processing, and a whole lot more. Although AI sounds really futuristic, work started on AI all the way back in 1956. And in the early days of AI, researchers looked at a number of techniques, but eventually settled on a way of trying to take human expert decision trees and write them into code. That changed in the early 1980s with machine learning, where rather than trying to put everything hard-coded, they decided to use data, big data, still quite little back in the 1980s, but getting bigger, to be able to train networks to teach themselves. But in the early days of machine learning, there was still a lot of hard coding that was involved. If I wanted to teach an AI to recognize a stop sign, I would program in the borders of the stop sign, the fact that it was red and had the letters STOP. We started to see machine learning really come into its own in 1997 when IBM's Big Blue won the World Chess Championship from Garry Kasparov. That was a milestone. But things really started heating up in 2010. And that's when this whole technique of deep learning came about. And deep learning is, if you like, the big brother of machine learning, where there's a lot less human intervention, and you're feeding the AIs massive amounts of data. YouTube videos, structured databases, unstructured databases, social media feeds, all kinds of information. Another milestone was also done by IBM in 2011, and that was when their AI won the game of Jeopardy from the reigning champs. And Jeopardy involved natural language processing as well as being able to figure out and in real time react to all kinds of trivia. Things really hotted up in the deep learning area in 2015 when researchers determined that specialized chipsets, GPUs, graphical processor units, could be used to do massive parallel processing and greatly speed up the decision process. And there was yet another milestone in 2016 when Google's DeepMind won the game of AlphaGo in 4 out of 5 matches. And that game is an ancient game that originated in China, and it's a game of strategy that's thought to be one of the pinnacles of human intellect and creativity and strategic moves. So we're starting to move into this era where speech recognition is becoming a part of our everyday lives. How many of you have one of these gadgets, either an Amazon Echo or a Google Home? Anybody? How many of you are using, let's say, Siri on your smartphone, or Cortana, or OK Google? Raise your hands, right? These are digital assistants, and they can be really handy, but what you need to be aware of is that they are always on, always listening for their keywords. So if you want to talk to an Amazon Echo, you say, hey, Alexa, right? But it's always listening to everything that's around you. Last year, there was a murder case in Arkansas where the accused perpetrator of the crime had an Amazon Echo in his house, and the police wanted to get access to the recordings of the Amazon Echo. And Amazon pushed back, citing, privacy and First Amendment and Fifth Amendment and a whole range of things. But eventually, the accused decided, yes, I'm happy to release the information that Amazon had. In the brief that Amazon filed with the court, they described how they're actually not only recording and storing the information that Echo hears, but also transcribing it and using it in different ways. So what's really important for you to understand is that these devices are always on, always listening, and in a business context, well, they may very well be built into your computer system or your smartphone. This is a screenshot from my computer that I'm using to display this, and at the time it was running High Sierra. It's a new system. I took it back down to Sierra because no matter what I did, I could not get Siri to stop popping up and asking to be turned on. And frankly, I consider that both a privacy risk and a security risk because I do not want my clients' business conversations recorded. I do not want my personal conversations recorded. And the thing that you need to think about from a security perspective is it's not just your personal privacy at stake. If you can imagine sitting in a board meeting where people have smartphones and computers and digital assistants are integrated in with the operating systems of these devices, and you have third parties that are always listening, always collecting, always recording, and in many cases reselling that data, there are real corporate risks. Let's say you're discussing a merger or an acquisition and you've got stock market disclosure responsibilities, but that data gets leaked out because of some sort of recording that you actually didn't even know about. Somebody had a phone in their pocket and you did not know. You could find that as a company director, you're culpable for a stock market breach and for regulatory breaches, and there are a lot of implications for this. By about 2020, only 2 years from now, I think it's going to be very, very common for people to have digital avatars. And they'll be like Siri or Alexa or Cortana or OK Google, but double the capabilities that they have today with natural language recognition that is well beyond today's capabilities because it's doubling every 18 months or so in an exponential way. Another interesting thing that's happening is in the world of transhumanism. How many of you have heard of that? It's this idea that some people would really like to live forever. They might want to cryogenically freeze their body if they have a disease and hope to be woken up in 200 years when the disease is cured. They want to be able to upload their brain into computers and live virtually forever. But there's another interim step as well, and that's actually creating a digital replica of you, a mind file. Literally, if you like, a clone of who you are in the world today. And we're actually starting to seed mind files already with the things that we put into social media. One of the researchers in this area is Martine Rothblatt. And she made a mind file of her wife, Bina, and put it into a robotic form, which is this picture up in the middle top. Bina 48. Bina is very much alive and well, but she has a robotic mind file clone that you're able to dialogue with, and she reacts like the real Bina. There was actually a TV series called Limitless, which had an episode about a year and a half ago of a scientific researcher who was murdered. And she was a researcher in this whole new area of mind files. And they queried her mind file robotic replica to determine who her murderer was. Facial recognition and biometrics in general are another aspect of artificial intelligence that is already creeping into our everyday lives. Facial recognition is getting so good that it can pick out people very quickly from cameras that are actually at an angle and people moving in crowds. NEC has a product that I was reading some of the literature about recently where they claim that in a third of a second it can scan out an individual face from a database of 1.6 million people. These kinds of technologies are already being used in casinos to be able to pick out VIP customers or customers who may be banned, by police around the world to pick out known criminals or suspected criminals or even missing persons or somebody who has a healthcare problem like dementia who may have wandered out. But it goes beyond this too. We're moving into the era with artificial intelligence where not only can we figure out who a person is, we can figure out what their emotions are by the expressions on their face. And in a lot of cases, it's more accurate than people's own perceptions are because not all of us are very good at reading body language. We're seeing artificial intelligence also being used in real time with CCTV camera feeds. This is a screenshot from a company called IC Real Time, and they have an AI called Ella, which uses deep learning techniques to be able to scan CCTV feeds in real time and allow a user to have a natural language query interface directly into these feeds. So let's say there was an incident at a bank or an ATM machine and somebody in a red hoodie was spotted near the incident. You could type in red jacket or man in red or woman in red and it would pick out the relevant video to show you in real time. And it works with anything from one camera to several thousand cameras. But image recognition is not infallible. In fact, it can be very easily tricked. And the reason it can be tricked is because of some of the mathematical functions that underlie how this works. It's not a flaw in AI, it's literally just how the linear functions work in this analysis. And in fact, all you have to do is jiggle less than 1% of the pixels in an image to fool an AI into thinking that your cute little dog is an ostrich, or that a pyramid is an ostrich, or that a school bus is an ostrich, or anything else that you want it to be, or to thinking that my picture is actually a photo of Osama bin Laden or somebody else. You can imagine the implications of being able to suddenly take this technique of image recognition, hack it, trick it, and use it for nefarious purposes. So one of the things that I would caution all the security professionals and audit professionals in the rooms to be aware of is just because an AI says an image is X doesn't necessarily mean that it always is. And you can hack these databases too. Another thing that's happening in the world of AI is to be able to change the text that somebody, the speech that somebody says through a text editor. So imagine that there's a recording of my speech today, and I say, I believe privacy is important. and somebody else decides to say, well, actually, we're going to change Shara's viewpoint. She's going to say privacy doesn't matter. And they go in and they take the words that I've said, literally type the word differently to what I have said, and the AI puts together phonemes from different words and speeches that I've said, and it substitutes it in real time, allowing you to change the text of what someone has said through a text-based editor. So you can imagine if you're a newscaster or you're recording a podcast that something like this could be really useful if you've flubbed it, or you've misspoken, or you've just mispronounced a word. You want to fix it up without having to re-recording. Really cool. But what if it actually is used to have the CEO of your company authorize a bank transfer that he or she never authorized? It gets even scarier. There's a new technique called deep fakes. And this is a combination of deep learning and fake news. And it's only come about in the last month or so. It's a relatively new technique. And a bunch of images were posted to YouTube by a user called Derpfakes, who took Saturday Night Live performances from Alex Baldwin and a number of others. In this picture, Alex Baldwin was imitating President Trump. But what they did was be able to take real images from President Trump, superimpose it on Alex Baldwin's Saturday Night Live performance, and actually make it look like the president was saying something that he didn't. On the left-hand side, I'm showing some images of a researcher in this field who's basically mucking around with some video from Vladimir Putin and changing the expression on Vladimir's face. So if you can imagine, you take this text editing and video editing, and suddenly you have the CEO of your company admitting to criminal actions on behalf of your company. Or you have a weaponized version of this where a political leader has just said, and I have launched a nuclear strike against North Korea because I'm tired of all of this, stuff that's going on, and the nukes are going to hit in the next 5 minutes. You can imagine how this kind of tool can be used to create a lot of chaos. And it's not just in the political sphere, it's in the business sphere that we need to be concerned as well. AI is also being used to help defend us. And there's a company that is another spin-out of Cambridge, and it's called Futurist. And there were mathematicians who were looking at the gaming industry for spotting fakes and basically picking up anomalies of when people who were playing video games seemed to have superhuman powers of being able to see through walls and suddenly acquired all kinds of sharpshooting skills. And they took this anomaly detection and applied it to the banking and finance industry with an AI that they call ARIC. So ARIC is now being used by banks and other finance organizations to look at the patterns that an individual user has when he or she interacts with a banking website and determine whether something is an abnormal pattern for that particular user, and waving a red flag when there's an anomaly detection that is happening in real time. One thing, though, that many people do not realize with AI is that as the neural networks get bigger and bigger and bigger, researchers do not know how the AIs are making these decisions. And there's a classic example that was published late last year by the OpenAI lab of an AI that they had developed that used deep learning techniques to do a video game for boat racing, and the object of the game was to finish the race, but with the most number of points. And you gain points when a little green widget pops up and you run over it and you catch the points. But the AI got obsessed with getting points and never bothered to cross over the finish line. It would go around in circles, it would crash into other boats, it would crash into other walls, never bothered to finish. And what the researchers determined is because you basically have this big black box in neural networks, that we need to use a technique called reinforcement learning and get humans into the loop to be able to understand how to correct the AI's action as it's learning. One of the new jobs of the future that I think is going to be big is something that I'm calling an AI trainer, and a similar job that will involve robot teachers, because in the robotics world, not only do you have the learning of information, but you've got the ability to move about spatially. And there's another technique that is being used called imitation learning, where humans in virtual reality suits with controllers are able to start teaching robots how to move spatially and, say, pick up delicate items in a warehouse and grasp different things in different ways by literally mimicking the human controllers. We're also going to see a range of jobs in the AI world that start teaching AIs and robots to feel, or at least seem to feel, the heart space that we humans have. And it's one of those soft skills that is going to become more and more important as these machines become pervasive in our environment. I also think another very important role that we will be seeing in the corporate world will be something that I call a chief ethics officer. And this role will evolve around looking at the decisions that AIs make and determining whether those decisions are actually congruent with the values and the ethics that humans in the company would also apply to the same situation. There's an example of an AI that's gone wrong here in America in the criminal justice system, and the AI was being used to look at the potential of parolee applications, potential of recidivism, in other words, repeating a crime. And what they found was that although they fed 134 factors into the AI, none of which included race or ethnicity or any other demographics like that, that the AI was being consistently lenient towards white defendants and consistently more harsh to defendants of color. And the researchers were really perplexed as to why this was happening, because it wasn't fed in. And I have a hypothesis, which is just a hypothesis because I'm not involved in this project. I think that the AI picked up on underlying social sentiments and racial bias in documents that have filed criminals throughout his or her criminal career path, and that those social biases that are reflected in the words that might have been used or the phraseology of text have been used to influence the weightings in the AI judgment. So having a human in the loop looking at the decision process is going to be a really, really important thing moving into the future. Now, just like we'll be using AI as an important tool in our security toolkit, and already there are a number of companies that are using AI for cyber defense, I also think that we're going to see the bad actors also using AI for attacks. And a number of researchers are starting to put forward papers suggesting that 2018 is going to be the first year that we see a real AI cyber attack, and it may very well be the first year that we see an AI-based digital avatar virus. So in other words, if you can imagine a virus that's living on your smartphone or your computer system that is sitting there lurking, picking up all of your habits and how you communicate with different people. So maybe you sign your emails to friends or partners with an X, you know, for a kiss, right? It'll pick up on the fact that you communicate that way to some people and use a different, more formal language in your business communication. Start to learn the nuances of who you are as a person, sitting there waiting for an ideal situation to then turn that against you, perhaps in your professional life, and get access to systems and information that are privy to your company. We need to really be on the lookout for this to start happening this year. A lot of people ask me, How smart will AI get? Is there an upper limit? And if you ask AI researchers, they will tell you it would be foolish to put an upper limit on how smart AI can get. And in fact, at a conference last year, half of the AI researchers in the room thought that artificial intelligence may reach human-level capability by the year 2040 to 2050. And by the time we get to the year 2075, 90% of the researchers thought that AI would start to have human-level intelligence and capability, moving beyond the very narrow AI, single-task AI of today into what we would call general intelligence. Now, AI is not just software, it's robots, and they'll come in lots of shapes and sizes. We're already starting to see humanoid robots in companion robots and in a lot of other industries, but we also have driverless cars. We have robots that are being used in mining and in agriculture and in warehousing and even serving food in restaurants. Lots in shapes and sizes, and I could probably talk to you about robots all day because I've been a sci-fi geek since I was a little girl and I just love robots. But one of the things that I would say we need to be aware of is flying robots, drones. And one of the reasons I bring that up is because these robots are most frequently armed with cameras. And these cameras see not only in the visual spectrum, but also infrared. And they're used for a lot of great purposes, including asset inspection, disaster recovery. There's even flying taxis being invented. The picture down on the bottom on the far right is the world's first flying taxi. I saw it at CES last year. It's the Ehang 184, developed in China. It can carry a person that's up to about 200 pounds for about 100 kilometers an hour for about 20 minutes. And it's completely autonomous, and that's only the first of many. There are trials that are happening in New Zealand with the consent of the New Zealand government of another personal flying taxi called Cora from a company called Kitty Hawk, and it's likely to be starting to do real flying taxi services in the next 18 months. It's crazy, right? But when you start thinking about infrared and cameras, you also have to think about surveillance and what the implications might be. And these drones are getting tinier and tinier. The pictures that I'm showing you here are little tiny drones, one of which was developed by the Air Force. Can you imagine that something that size was sitting on a bookshelf in your boardroom and videotaping and recording? Would you even know it's there? And it's not just the military that's developing it. Researchers are developing these capabilities too. These are robo-bees that are being developed at Harvard University, and they've been developed to help fight the bee colony collapse disorder. And they work as swarm bots. You know, it's not just one little one, it's a whole bunch of swarm bots. And they act in unison. And this is going to still research, but live in like 5 to 10 years. You know, the stuff in sci-fi is coming real. Let me show you where this could go. This is about a 2-minute clip.
Pilots directed almost 3,000 precision strikes last year. We're super proud of it. It allows you to separate the bad guys from the good. It's a big deal. But we have something much bigger. Your kids probably have one of these, right? Not quite. Hell of a pilot? No. That skill is all AI. It's flying itself. Its processor can react 100 times faster than a human. The stochastic motion is an anti-sniper feature. Just like any mobile device these days, it has cameras and sensors, and just like your phones and social media apps, it does facial recognition. Inside here is 3 grams of shaped explosive. This is how it works. Did you see that? That little bang is enough to penetrate the skull and destroy the contents. They used to say guns don't kill people. People do. Well, people don't. They get emotional, disobey orders, aim high. Let's watch the weapons make the decisions. Now, trust me, these were all bad guys. Now, that is an airstrike of surgical precision. It's one of a range of products. Trained as a team, they can penetrate buildings, cars, trains, evade people, bullets, pretty much any countermeasure. They cannot be stopped.
Now, I cut the video there, but it goes on to show what happens when these little swarm bots called slaughter bots get taken over by terrorists, and they decide to invade the halls of Congress and take out all of the members of Congress of a political party. And then they go on to show what happens when they match social media profiles with dissident views, and they start going after people in dorm rooms and all over the place and literally taking them out. Now, this is science fiction right now, but the thing is that what it takes to make this a reality, it's all there. It's just a matter of actually doing the assembly of all these different components. It was put together by a group of AI researchers who are for a ban on autonomous lethal weapons, and that's because things can get out of control. And I think that that is something that we really need to think about very carefully as we start deploying systems, is what happens if things go wrong? And that leads me to the Internet of Things. And we heard Rob talk about smart cities. And of course, there's all sorts of IoT in almost everything that you can imagine, whether it be a fridge or a hearing aid or that cute little robot seal that I'm holding called Paro, which is used in healthcare, or your child's toys. One of the things that happened last year was we found out that a lot of IoT vendors downloaded software from a third-party OEM called GSOAP, and that there was actually a flaw in this IoT security software where it had a memory leak, a buffer overwrite, and it allowed hackers to be able to control the video feeds of any of these IoT devices. This code was downloaded over 1 million times and is used in a whole range of different devices. If you buy a toy for your child or a refrigerator for your work office, do you know where the code comes from? And if there's a flaw, will that flaw be fixed? So this one was found out by security researchers, but who knows whether all of the people that downloaded the GSOAP software and used it in their products actually applied the patch, and how that patch would have been rolled out to devices that are already in situ in your home or in your office. So we need to think very carefully as we have IoT coming online in a lot of different ways, what the implications are. Another really cool technology is augmented reality, and that's where you have a digital world superimposed on your real-world vision. And there are lots of applications, both in your personal life and in your professional life. In particular, there's a company called Dacry that has this smart helmet that is designed for a combination of like construction helmet and augmented reality. And through back-end integration, it's able to help people, for instance, in maintaining water pipes, to get images from the SCADA network and superimpose it on their line of sight, to be able to see, if you like, X-ray vision, what's inside a pipe and how hot or cold it is, and to see a knob superimposed, turn it this way. But imagine if that feed of information were hacked, and suddenly through your augmented reality visor or headset, you're being told to turn a knob in the wrong direction that actually starts a nuclear meltdown, or releases contaminants into the water supply, or does something else that is actually against your principles and what you would want to do. So as you start seeing these technologies being rolled out in your companies, you really want to look at the security aspect of that as well. We're also seeing super hacks on the rise, and I'm talking to a room of security professionals, and I know that you're very well aware of the things that are happening. One that I worry about is the Yahoo hack. 1 billion people basically had their email compromised. Another one that I find really worrying that happened over a year ago is the Juniper hack for their virtual private networks, where basically the source code was got at and changed to allow administrative access to encrypted VPNs. And that had to be an inside job. That wasn't just a hacker. And these things do happen. And it's not just the hackers that we have to worry about. I think we also need to start thinking very carefully about how much freedom we're willing to let our governments take away from us. So I live in Sydney. In Australia in 2014, the Australian government introduced the metadata retention laws, which essentially forced all the ISPs and telcos across Australia to retain the metadata from all of your communications across all of your personal and company devices for a period of 2 years. And it's not being collected by the NSA equivalent, it's actually being collected and held at the government's behest by individual telcos and ISPs, some of which are really big, some of which are really small. They have different security practices, and they have different breaches that have already happened. But essentially, they're creating honeypots that hackers now know that these honeypots are being collected. And ostensibly, it's being done to prevent terrorism and to have police gain warrantless access to information very quickly. But already there is scope creep. Last year, there was an incident where federal police raided the Australian Liberal Party database of information about the National Broadband Network to try to determine where journalist leaks had happened. And that has nothing to do with terrorists. That was very much about politics down under. So, as you have these laws that are rolled out ostensibly for security and to prevent terrorism, we need to think very carefully of who else might have access to that data and really tightly limiting who does have access, where it's stored, how it's secured, and for how long. There's another thing that's happening back in my home patch that worries me, and that's the Aussie government's wanting to block encryption, basically saying because of terrorism and bad actors, we want internet companies and social media companies and others to give us backdoors into encrypted communications. Well, I don't think I need to tell any of you here that once a backdoor is there, it's not going to be just law enforcement that uses it, it's going to be the bad guys too, and that's a really bad idea. Another thing that's really fascinating is quantum computing. Is there anybody in the room that's actually a quantum physics geek? Anyone who loves quantum physics besides me? How many of you have heard of Schrodinger's cat? So that's, quantum physics, a cat that's in a box, and the cat is both alive and dead at the same time. Well, if you can imagine in quantum computing, you've got this box, and instead of it having ones and zeros like we have in today's computers, it has every single state in between the 1 and 0. And the more states that the quantum computer has, the faster and faster it has the capability of decrypting things. And what they call them is qubits. Late last year, IBM released one of the first quantum computers that had a 50-qubit capability. It's been said that a computer with a 4,000-qubit capability can break all of today's encryption, including blockchain. So already there are researchers who are looking, if you like, at the next version of blockchain, and in particular cryptocurrency, one called Q-Bitcoin, to be able to use quantum computing to protect the things that we want to keep valuable. But again, it's something to keep your eye on, because as advances in quantum computing happen, today's really strong encryption will be able to be broken very, very quickly. Another thing to think about is the power grid. And here in America, in Australia, and many other countries, the power grid is extremely vulnerable to attack from solar flares, coronal mass ejections. You know, these are natural things which happen on a cycle. The last one happened in 1859. It was called the Carrington event, and it basically took out the telegraph systems. Now, if that happened today, that would take out most of modern society, especially if it was on a wide scale. And the grids are also susceptible to electromagnetic pulses, which may be originated as part of a state-based action or a terrorist action. And there is a move in the US to protect the grid, but for some reason it just has not passed. It would cost about $2 billion to really harden the grid, and it hasn't happened, and it should, because it impacts everybody. Biometrics are another really important aspect of security, especially multi-factor biometrics. You know, fingerprints, facial recognition, iris recognition, voice recognition. But what happens if a biometric database is compromised? If you want to get your face back, are you going to get plastic surgery? If somebody has stolen a database of fingerprints, which happened with the Office of Personnel Management, was it not quite 2 years ago, your fingerprints are out there, and that database had the fingerprints of spies and CIA operatives and so on. You know, how do you get your fingerprint back? You don't. Well, at Iowa State University, where's my friends from Iowa? Okay, there you are, yes. Iowa State University, they're developing what may very well be an invisibility shield. It's a material, it's a metamaterial that uses a liquid metal called gallium-stan that is able to block out radar frequencies, and it's bendable and flexible. And what they're looking to do is to make these little O-size rings smaller and smaller to eventually be able to block out visible light. So if you can imagine in 5 or 10 years' time, if you don't want to be seen by CCTV cameras, maybe you'll wear clothing or makeup that has these little gallium-stan rings, and you'll be invisible to the cameras. Another technology on the horizon is something that's coming out of Binghamton University, and it's a brain print. And this is a biometric that I think has a lot of potential. So right now, it uses these EEG skull caps to look at your brain process. And what the researchers have figured out is because each of us have been socialized and grew up in a different way, even if we're identical twins, when we see images, and in particular a set of images, we react in our brains differently to the images to every other person on the planet, including our sister or brother or our twin. And not only that, but if that biometric database is compromised, unlike your fingerprints, all you need to do is record another set of brain prints using different images, and suddenly you've reestablished a biometric tool. By the time something like this comes to market, you're not going to be wearing a skull cap. You may not even have a physical sensor touching you. It may be an implant. But last year at CES, I actually was doing a contactless brain-machine interface-controlled car racing video game where the sensor was on a pillow in a sofa in back of me. My head was not touching the pillow. And all I had to do to control this video racing game was think about where I wanted the car to go, and the car went there. Gosh, it sounds like sci-fi, but I did the demo last year, and it worked. So where will we go into the future? Will we be taking this technology into our bodies? Well, I think we probably will. One of the very first places we'll be doing it is with smart contacts, probably on the 5-year horizon. So imagine that you're taking the capability of augmented reality, matching it with camera technology and telecommunications capabilities, and medtech. So if you can imagine, Google, Sony, and Samsung already have patents that have these smart contacts with cameras that get triggered by blinking. and they've got the patents on it. The pictures that I'm showing you here are prototypes from Google. The big picture is from 2014, and you can see there's a lot of opaque bits. The smaller picture is a later iteration from 2016, and you can see that there's a lot more white space. By the time this comes to market, it's likely to be all transparent, made out of material called graphene, which is super strong, super thin, translucent, and highly flexible, and a good conductor of electricity. But what's even more interesting is marrying it with biomed capabilities. So there are pharma companies that are looking to marry this with auto sensing. So if I need reading glasses, which I do, instead of popping them on and off, my smart contacts will auto-focus on exactly what I'm looking at. There are researchers that are looking to give us telephoto capabilities and infrared capabilities, but it's even cooler than that. It turns out that the chemicals in our tear ducts can tell a lot about our biology. So if I have diabetes, today I'd have to do pinpricks on a regular basis to detect my insulin levels. With this kind of technology, my insulin levels would be detected through a chemical called lacriglobin in my tear ducts, and I would know when to take my medicine. If I were in this conference room, I'd be able to look out onto the sea of faces and through facial recognition pick out all of you, even those of you in the back, and match you with your social media profiles. Another medical application is in the treatment and detection of glaucoma. There are medical researchers who are looking at measuring intraocular pressure to detect glaucoma at an early stage. So this is going to be a really big market and a platform, just like the iTunes Store and the Google Play Store is. In about 7 years' time, you're probably going to be able to have smart contacts where you start downloading all kinds of applications that are either ICT applications or biotech applications to your smart contacts. And we're going to see all kinds of human implants, whether they be brain-machine interfaces or memory augmentation as well. One of the things that's being worked on at UC Berkeley and actually at DARPA is to be able to have implants that go into a person that are nano-sized. And DARPA has a project called Electrix, or ElectRx, which is looking at being able to monitor soldiers' nervous systems directly from implants and be able to control things like pain and also be able to control mood and correct for post-traumatic stress disorders. They put out a number of research grants. UC Berkeley won one of them, and they've come up with this idea of little nanodust. And right now, it's at millimeter size, but it's going to go a whole lot smaller and get down to the nano. It's already the size of a grain of sand, and they have successfully attached these implants to the nerve fibers of rats to be able to pick up their electrical signals in their brains using ultrasound, which is not as biologically destructive to a living organism as radio frequency signals. And the potential of this is really quite profound from both a medical perspective, but also an ethical perspective too. So if you can imagine that you've got these little bots in your body that are monitoring your organs and helping you with lots of different things, but think about the implications of having that implant owned and monitored by your employer. How many of you want an implant in your body that allows your employer to have access to your central nervous system? Anybody? Raise your hand. What happens, for instance, if you're a soldier and your tour of duty is over? You know, who owns that implant? Is it you or is it the government? And what happens if that implant is hacked into, you know, by bad actors, or maybe even someone who wants you to carry out an order of killing civilians that you say, no, I disagree with that morally, ethically, I can't shoot that person, and they're controlling your nervous system, and if you don't comply, instead of relieving pain, sending pain, you know, the implications are really quite profound. So One of the other things that is really science fiction, and I'm going to close in just a moment, and that is this idea of merging our brains with artificial intelligence. And I know there are a lot of sci-fi geeks out there. Matt, I see you. You love sci-fi, right? Just like me. In so many science fiction novels, you know, we have this concept of what we would call neural lace. You know, these nodes that are in our mind or in our bodies that give us augmented capabilities. Entrepreneurs like Elon Musk and others think that by taking these sorts of technologies into our body and augmenting our human body with artificial intelligence, that's one way that we're going to stay relevant in a world of AI and robots. I'm not so sure that that's actually how it's going to come about, but it is something that a lot of money is going into. And lastly, in the 2030s, we might see these sort of implants that are 3D printed DNA-based bots that get injected into the capillaries of our brain that attach our neocortex directly to the World Wide Web of the 2030s, whatever that may happen to look like. Imagine being able to send an email or a text just by thinking about it. And oops, hope you don't send it too fast or by mistake to the wrong person. Imagine being able to download a new skill like they did in the Matrix. Imagine that you had to solve a complex math problem and suddenly you spin up supercomputers, quantum computers to help you solve a problem in real time. Or imagine you have these bots in your body that are also monitoring your bodily functions and fixing things in real time. Wow, wouldn't that be amazing, you know, to actually get rid of disease just as it's starting to happen? But holy shit, what happens if somebody hacks into your brain? What are you going to do? Wipe it and start again? Where is that going to leave us? Look, thank you so very much for attending the CACS conference. We need your security. We need security professionals and privacy and ethics professionals more than ever right now. All of you men and women, what you are doing now is so important. We are at such an important juncture in the future of humanity. Keep putting up the good fight and be the white hat. Thank you.
Nice job. Wonderful. All right. Thanks so much, Rob and Shara. Those are some innovative ideas. No doubt they've brought new perspectives to this audience. So thank you so much for being here all the way from down under. One more time for Shara. Unbelievable.